guys, welcome back to our wonderful Wellness Wednesday. Thank you guys for joining us. Something that we did this week is we've been getting a lot of requests for comfort food and things that can help our guests feel comfortable in an environment that's not necessarily the most comfortable environment. So we wanted to just kind of bridge this gap between taking healthy food and comfort food and finding that happy medium between the two of them, because again, we're not just healing somebody's physical self, we're healing the whole person, right? So that's how we kind of contribute to that, is making them feel comfortable in this environment so that they're able to heal. So we emailed a few of our coworkers asking them to respond to us with some of their favorite comfort foods, and we're going to talk about some ways that we can make those comfort foods a little healthier. So while they're still comfort foods like mac and cheese, burgers, fried chicken, while they're still what they are, we can kind of reduce some calories, maybe do some substitutions and make them a little bit healthier.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the very first person to respond was our wonderful owner, Noah. And he wanted us to help him figure out how to make cheeseburgers healthier, which we are happy to do.
Absolutely.
Because they're wonderful and we love them as well. So.
All right. So we're going to touch on a few different things. We're going to go over a different recipe as to how you can basically make your own Beyond Burgers at home. And we'll post that recipe after the live session is over. And then Whitney's going to kind of go back and forth with why we substitute certain things for other ingredients and how it ends up benefiting us both nutritionally and with the mouthfeel and flavor.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, let's talk about burgers. Let's start with the meat you want to use.
So if you prefer to have beef, which a lot of people do because that's pretty normal for a burger, some of the things that you can do immediately to take away some calories and take away some fat content is just choosing a leaner cut of beef. It's always really good to go grass-fed. Those animals tend to be leaner. They have their meat's just a little bit different because they're not consuming a bunch of antibiotics, a bunch of additives, the things that we just don't necessarily want to find in our meat. But something that we can do is find, again, a leaner cut of meat. A 90-10 or a 95-5 are really good. But something that we also need to keep in mind when we are doing this is when we remove fat from food, we also remove flavor from food. So, I mean, again, going back to us being chefs, that's kind of one of the first things you learn is fat is flavor. While, again, it's not necessarily the best thing for you, depending on what it is, it adds a lot of flavor and moisture to your food. So
Absolutely.
If you remove that piece, you're going to end up with a little bit drier of a burger. The flavor's not going to be quite there. So we need to add some things to it. You can add a little egg white, which is going to add protein. It's also going to bind your burger a little bit better. It's going to keep it from falling apart while you're cooking it. You also need to add some moisture back in there. So a lot of times people will add like a Worcestershire sauce or some sort of flavor component to their burger. I like to do vegetable purees in mine personally, especially if we're substituting and doing a turkey burger as well. Again, a little bit drier, or a chicken burger. But if you do a fennel puree or an onion puree, these things are going to add a little bit of fiber. It's also going to create a little bit of a binder and a flavor component and some moisture. So that's a really positive thing. Do you want to touch on this one for me?
Yeah. So we'll do with the healthier thing. You want to go smaller and thinner patties. The thicker patty is going to not only crumble a little bit better or a little more, but the thinner patty you can get it packed in tight. And you're also controlling the portion size a little better. If you're trying to do an 8-ounce burger, it's tough to fit into those calorie and fat stipulations with that much meat.
Yeah.
We always talk about how 4 ounces of protein is the appropriate amount of protein per meal. Mm-hmm. So an 8-ounce burger, that's double.
Yeah, it's big.
So smaller, thinner patties. And then when you grill something, the fat's going to drip out. So not only will that help to make it a little leaner, but you'll lose some flavor. And then while you're grilling, based on the lower fat content, it's also going to be a little crumblier, which is why you need to add those binders back in.
Mm-hmm. And again, when we're talking about grilling versus a pan fry on your burger, if we're pan frying, those fats are starting to render. You're going to find those in the bottom of your pan. Then you're just cooking your product in that fat. It's going to kind of reabsorb some of that. If we cook it on the grill, it's gonna again drip through all those grates. You're rendering all of that fat out, but again, we do have that issue with the grind or the crumbliness of the product. Some other meat options that you can use if you're going to be doing burgers. I mean, there's so many options. Burgers are amazing. It's kind of like, as long as you follow like the guidelines, you're still creating a burger. So turkey burgers, again, are amazing. Bison burgers are great. The meat's a little leaner. It does have a little bit of a different flavor to it, but it's not a negative thing. Chicken burgers. Salmon, which is fantastic. You just kind of grind up your salmon, or you can flake it and create a patty out of it. Delicious. Highly recommend you try it if you haven't. Ahi tuna, you can do a tuna steak, or same thing with like what you're going to be doing with your salmon. You just kind of grind it up, create a patty, cook it, and then we can always do meatless, which we were talking about a little bit a minute ago. He mentioned the kind of the Beyond Burger or the vegetable based. There's a lot of different recipes out there. Black bean burgers, again, you're gonna get fiber, protein. It's got a really good mouthfeel to it because of all of the, the components of the legumes. They kind of have this almost fatty component to them. They're awesome. I also am gonna post a recipe for a meatless burger. It has beet juice, ground mushrooms, walnuts, legumes. You can pick your legumes. It also has a little bit of a grain in there. So it creates this really healthy, protein-packed, awesome burger that's, it's kind of deceptive. You're going to feel like you're eating a meat burger, but you're not. And it's also really good for you.
Absolutely. And another thing with all these other meats is a lot of times you can find them without any antibiotics, hormones. They're not as processed, especially the bison. You can usually find an organic, grass-fed, no antibiotics, no hormones, and that's also important to us.
Yeah, focusing on the quality of the product that you're getting is going to make a big difference. Like ground beef in general is something that I don't necessarily love it personally. There can be some really poor quality out there. Like I think the average is per pound of ground beef, you're getting around 20 different cows in that ground beef. So if you can get really good quality ground beef, get it from a reputable butcher, just know where your food is coming from. It's going to create better products in the long run.
All right, now that we got the meat part taken care of, let's move on to the bun.
Yes, so some things that we can do. Again, we're staying away from really refined grains, really refined sugars, things that are like white bread. Not our best friend because it's stripped all of the nutrients out of that product. So if you can go for whole grain, awesome. You can also do only half of your burger bun, or removing half of that out of there so that you're not getting quite so much bread. We call those patty melts. I've never had them. Fantastic. You can trough your roll. So if this is my bun and I open it up, instead of having the whole bun, I'm going to remove some of the bread from the inside. That way, it also, not only are you removing, probably 40% of the bread, but you can actually use that to hold all of your other goodies. And your burger won't fall apart when you're trying to eat it. Recommend you try it. It's fantastic. Right.
And then lettuce wrap. So you can always get some bib lettuce or some living bib. A lot of supermarkets carry it now. You can just trim it right off the root. It's all hydroponically grown. A couple of those, one on top, one on the bottom, or just a couple underneath to wrap it. And you can also use portobello mushrooms as bread. You can one on top, one on bottom, little season, little grill, and it's nice.
And it's fantastic. It tastes delicious, and it adds a little something to you. I mean, if you like mushrooms in your burger in the first place, try a portobello bun. It's actually kind of awesome. Now for cheeses, because again, it's not really a cheeseburger without cheese. There are a few things you can do here as well. I don't know if anybody's played with nutritional yeast very much, but both of us love it. It's fantastic, and it actually mimics the flavor of cheese in your mouth, and it's just it's flaked yeast. You can use it for a lot of different things. So if you want to go that route of non-dairy, vegan, try a little nutritional yeast on your bun or in your sauce that you're going to make for your burger. It's amazing. Also, you can go for lighter cheeses, things that have less fat content, your goat cheese, feta. or you can go plant-based cheese. We actually work with a lot of plant-based cheeses here at the lodge because we have a lot of people with different dietary requirements and requests. And we have some pretty good ones in-house right now that actually mimic regular dairy cheese. They stretch, they pull, they have really great flavor profiles. You can get them in a lot of different flavors. We have cheddar, mozzarella, and Parmesan that are all non-dairy on site right now, and they're awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then we also have to make sure you guys, when you're changing out your sauces or when you're picking sauces for your burgers, pick things that are really, not so high in sugar and not so high in calories. That's something you find the sneaky fats and the sneaky sugars and all of these additives.
Yeah, try to stay away from ketchup. Ketchup, especially the processed stuff that you're going to find in the store, is really just tomato and sugar.
It
really is.
Sugar.
It's just nothing but sugar. So mustards are always a good substitute. Mustards are usually a lot healthier, a lot less sugars. It's usually just the seed and some sort of vinegar with a little bit of spice and seasoning. So.
And then thinking about things, if you went with a tuna burger, what else are you going to serve with that? You could go for a slaw that's going to have a vinaigrette on it, and that can mimic your sauce. That can be your sauce, and it's not going to add a lot of calories, but it's going to add a lot of flavor profile. So, all right, we love burgers. Yay! Try some of those different options, and again, we're going to post the Beyond Burger recipe for you guys. Give it a shot. Let us know what you think.
Next, we're going to touch on lasagna. This comes to us from Jerry.
We're happy to have. He's new to us.
Jerry's our new president.
Yes.
President.
And we are so excited to have him as well. Lasagna. Now this one it's going to be a little easier than burgers. I mean, again, burgers, there's so much information there. There's so many broad ideas because, again, you follow the rules, you have yourself a burger. But lasagna is a little bit different. But there are a lot of things that you can do here as well. One of the things is to completely remove the cheese. You can create that creaminess and that kind of like cheese feel by using a bechamel. And bechamel is it's usually a milk-based sauce that's thickened with roux. And if you wanted to go that route, you can do a gluten-free roux. You can use oil instead of butter. Remove that piece. You can use a low-fat milk or a non-dairy milk, as long as it's not sweetened, otherwise it's going to ruin your food. And you can create that creamy sauce in a lot of different healthy ways. But that would be my first recommendation on how to remove the cheese and the fat content from that. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Another way to make this a little healthier is the gluten-free pasta sheets. So everybody usually wants some sort of pasta in lasagna. It's kind of a layered pasta dish, so it needs to be there. I think our first recommendation would be just some gluten-free pasta sheets. In most places you can pick that up at the store. Another option is to just do sheets of vegetables. So you can do zucchini noodles, or you can sheet some zucchini down. Zucchini is probably one of the best vegetables to use for a noodle substitute.
Agreed.
It's gluten-free, obviously. It's healthy, and you're not getting all those flours and stuff. And then if you want a meat substitute, we kind of recommend making a mushroom duxelle. It's basically just highly chopped up mushrooms that have been cooked together with some herbs and some garlic and shallot, and it basically makes this nice umami bomb of chopped up mushrooms that can resemble meat.
Yeah, and it's super flavorful. It's really delicious. A lot of times it doesn't even really taste like mushrooms. If that's something that you're kind of like, oh, mushrooms, I don't love mushrooms, give it a try because you might actually surprise yourself. Once it's cooked down and kind of in its element, it's an amazing, recipe additive. Love it.
So basically, you would have your bechamel and you would have your noodles, basically either gluten-free or vegetable-based. You would need some sort of red sauce, preferably homemade. You can make it a very easy tomato sauce, or you can find it in a jar. And then some veggies, whichever one you like, zucchini, squash, carrots, onions, mushrooms. You can even add some spinach and greens in there and just layer it like you would. A little bit of red sauce, a little bit of bechamel, next layer of mushrooms, and this and that, and just keep layering it up.
The one thing to keep in mind though, however, if you are going to do a completely vegetable-based lasagna, is while these vegetables start to cook down, their cell structure is going to break, and then you're going to get a lot of moisture. So if that's going to happen, I recommend either par cooking your vegetables and pressing them before you layer them up, so that you don't get a lot of soupiness in your pan, because it's going to make it really hard to get out of the pan later on. But other than that, that's going to be delicious. I kind of want to have some of that. Not gonna lie.
All right, so the next one we're going to touch on is probably the most asked for out of all
very popular.
the requests we got, which is mac and cheese adaptations. Everybody wants mac and cheese, but they want to be able to make it healthy. So
yeah, and there's a lot we can do here. Mac and cheese is one of those. I mean, if you think of mac and cheese, it's kind of hard to stray too far from the original product without it becoming something completely different, because it's a macaroni product and a cheese sauce, right? So in order to do this, there's a lot of things that we can do. The first one being reducing your fat content. So if you're going to make your bechamel, which is again your base root for or base sauce for your mac and cheese, again, go back, think about maybe using a different flour that's not going to add a lot of inflammatory stuff, or not adding the butter in there, doing an oil and gluten-free flour roux. Or you can thicken it a different way. There's a couple of other thickeners out there. Not all of them are made from milk. I would stay away from arrowroot. Arrowroot and milk do not mix. Stay away. But the first thing you can do, add some prominent flavors. Because again, when we start removing fat, we're adding sugar. That's one of those sneaky sugar tricks that a lot of industries use. When we start removing the flavor from fat, they add sugar back in to replace that flavor. So really keep in mind of that piece. But once we start removing fat, we can start adding other flavors like roasted tomatoes, or red bell peppers, or roasted garlic. There's a lot of different things we can do, but once we start replacing that flavor that you're going to be removing by taking that fat piece out of there and taking the cheese down a little bit, you're just going to be replacing it with a different flavor profile, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Butternut squash makes awesome cheese sauce. So if that's something you guys are interested in, you can actually take the roux out completely, because you have the fiber structure from the butternut squash that's going to replace that thickening of the roux. So if you do half of your sauce is butternut squash puree, and then you kind of keep the rest of your ingredients with your cheese and your milk, you're going to be removing a lot of calories, but you're going to be adding creaminess. So think of like a really, really smooth, silky butternut squash soup. Add some cheese to it and make that your sauce base. It's awesome. And it adds a lot of good things to you too. You're getting a serving of vegetables.
Real quickly, how would you do your butternut squash puree?
So how I would do it, I would take my butternut squash, cut it in half, take out the seeds, face down on a sheet tray, a little bit of water in there, throw it in the oven, let those things roast. You'll be able to tell when they're done, because the bottom of the top of the butternut squash that's facing the top of the oven is going to start to get all dimply and brown. That's when you know they're ready. You can pull those out, scrape it out, put it in a blender, start to blend it up, add a little bit of milk. That's going to thin it out, and that's your sauce base. It's pretty fantastic. So give that a shot. We can also go tofu. Tofu is another, silken tofu is another good replacement. It has kind of the texture of yogurt. It's going to add protein, it's going to add this silkiness, and it's going to add a fat mouthfeel. It's great. You can use it as a vegan mac and cheese sauce base. It adds a lot to your dish. Again, if you think of mac and cheese, there's not a lot of protein in there. If you want to almost make it entree style, add some silken protein to your sauce. You now have protein. So it's kind of awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about, once again, vegan cheeses. So some of these vegan cheeses that we discussed earlier, they're almost, you can't even tell the difference between it and cheese. It smells like Parm, or it smells like cheddar. The texture's the same, the flavor's the same, and when you actually see it melt, it actually does melt and string. So you can find several of them in a health food store, and that would be a great substitute as well.
Daya is a really good brand. We have a couple of other ones.
Chow
is really good. That one pulls really, really easily. That's good. Yeah.
The next would be gluten-free or veggie noodles.
Yeah. Yep, so veggie noodles, I mean, there's a lot of different pastas out there. So you can always replace just your plain old, white flour pasta with something that's a little bit more healthy, or that's vegetable based or legume based. We have a lentil pasta in house that's actually really delicious. You can the texture's a little bit different. Something you have to keep in mind if you're using those kinds of pastas is you don't overcook them, because then they start to disintegrate and it'll ruin your dish. So when you're going to cook these, cook them about 75% of the way, add your cheese sauce, and then finish it that way. Bake it off, finish the cooking process while the pasta is in the sauce, and then that way they won't become mushy.
So what if you wanted to do like a cauliflower substitute on the mac and cheese?
That's definitely a possibility. Again, we've got to remember too, if you want to go completely healthy, like take the pasta completely out of the picture, and then you're going to end up with like a vegetable-based pasta dish with your with your cheese sauce, which would also be delicious. I mean, vegetables and cheese go together really, really well. But if you took cauliflower and either roasted it to get some good texture on it, or blanched it a little bit, and then added your cheese sauce to it, it's going to be a really, close your eyes and eat that. You're not even going to be able to tell the difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. And our last comfort food that we're going to go over today was submitted by Carrie. Hi, Carrie, we love you. It is fried chicken. Now, we both love fried chicken. So this one was kind of a fun one for us to go through. This one is more of a technique change as opposed to a massive ingredients change. There's a couple of different ways we can do this. If you've ever played with an air fryers are awesome. It's going to remove so much fat added into your entree, but it's also going to continue to have that crispiness. Air fryers work by circulating really hot air around the product, and that's what cooks it and gets it crispy, as opposed to frying it in oil.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the way we're going to tell you to do it is in the oven now, because not everyone has an air fryer. But the technique is the same. If you have a convection oven, I recommend using that. Definitely to circulate that air, it helps. So the first step we want to do is we want to remove the skin. The skin, lots of extra flavor in there, but lots of cholesterol, lots of fat.
It's not necessarily needed. If we're thinking fried chicken, a lot of people will be like, oh my god, but isn't that the crispy part of the chicken? And it's actually the breading. So while that can add to the crispiness, what you're going to get most of is the breading. That's going to give you your crispy fried chicken.
So is there anything you like to do your chicken before you start this process? Do you like to brine it? Do you like to...
Yes. So what you need to make sure you do, now whether or not you use buttermilk or not, buttermilk is amazing. It's really acidic. So when we put our chicken down in there, it's one, going to start pulling some of the toxins that are in the meat out. And two, the acid that's in the buttermilk is actually going to start to break down the proteins. It's going to start to denature the proteins. So if you think of proteins, like these little coils, so what the acid is doing is uncoiling that protein so that it's not so tough. So that's why when we marinate things, when we brine things, that piece, that acid piece, is actually breaking apart those proteins so you have more tender product. So I would really highly recommend you do this piece. Again, whether or not you use buttermilk, just use something that's got an acid in it. You could even do like a vinaigrette brine on that or something along those lines so that it does have an acid component. That's not only going to break down those proteins, but it's also going to add a lot of flavor. So if I take my buttermilk, I'm going to season my buttermilk. I'm going to put garlic in it. I'm going to put my herbs and spices in there. So as my chicken is sitting in that buttermilk, it's absorbing all of these flavors as the proteins are breaking down.
And if you do use a vinaigrette or a brine, something with a little more acid in it, make sure you do not leave it in there for too long. It will start cooking the outside of the chicken. It'll start actually making it a little rubbery as opposed to breaking down those proteins. So if you do use some sort of vinegar-based or acid-based ingredient or brine, make sure it's only in there 30, 45 minutes tops.
Yeah, not too long. And if you go buttermilk, it can actually sit there overnight. So that's the difference between those acid content, the acid content on those. Buttermilk's going to break down and add moisture flavor. Brines and vinaigrettes are actually going to do a little bit of the opposite. It will add flavor and break down, but like he was saying, there is such thing as an acid cook. So when you have ceviche and things like that, they're cooked through the acid. Well, it's not really cooked, but that protein's denatured and then it starts to coagulate again. So.
All right, so then our next step is we're basically we have the skin removed. We're gonna take the chicken, we're gonna either spray with a little bit of healthy non-stick cooking spray, preferably olive oil based, or if you have some other sort of olive oil, I guess you could brush it on or something like that. And that's basically just going to help the coating stick to the chicken.
We don't wanna add too much to it. Again, if we have our chicken just sitting in a puddle of oil, we kind of defeated the purpose. So just a little is enough.
So next is the flour. You can do this a couple different ways. You can use gluten-free flour, 1-to-1 substitutes. Bob's Red Mill has a great 1-to-1 substitute.
That's awesome.
You could use rice flour. You can use
everything. Cornmeal. You could do old school grandma style. Break up the corn flakes, bread it in that. There's a lot of different options here. So depending on what you're looking for your end product, that's going to help you decide what you're going to use to coat your chicken in.
So we have that, we season it all up, salt, pepper, your 13 or 11, whatever KFC's blends of herbs and spices that you want to put in, season it to your liking. I always like to taste a little bit of my flour mix, make sure my salt or my spice levels are right. You know, there's nothing worse than getting through your whole chicken thing and realizing it was either way too salty or not enough salt, or it needed a little more of this or that. So make sure you taste a little bit of that. Coat your chicken, and then you're ready for the cooking process.
You are. And this is going to be your best friend. So this is an oven rack. It sits down inside of your cookie sheet. So it's got these little risers here that are going to lift it up off of the tray. And the purpose of this is a couple of things. One, you're going to need to spray this with some cooking spray or brush it so that your chicken doesn't stick to it and all the coating rips off when you go to pick it up out of the oven. But what this is going to do is two things. If there is any residual fat on your chicken, again, we talked about rendering earlier. Once that fat reaches a certain temperature, it's going to melt and drip away. So you're removing some of that fat out, and it's going to allow air to circulate. So since we are wanting our fried chicken to be nice and crispy all the way around, not just one side of it, we want that air to circulate through the oven, and this is going to help with that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so let's complete the dish.
Okay.
Mashed potatoes.
Everybody's favorite. We love mashed potatoes. Okay, so there's a couple of ways we can make these a little bit healthier as well. First recommendation, again, like white potatoes, white starch, people kind of just try to stay away from them. Depending on who you are and what your body likes and does not like, sometimes people don't agree with white potatoes, and that's okay. But what you can do, there are a bunch of different types of potatoes out there. I personally like mashed red potatoes or mashed sweet potatoes or mashed Yukon Gold potatoes that can, steer you away from those just plain old white starchy potatoes.
Yeah, I prefer any sort of potato, like you said, a red or a Yukon Gold, a waxy potato versus an Idaho or a russet potato.
They just have different starch contents to them, and their flavor profiles are a little different. So you can take half of that out and replace it with some mashed cauliflower. Cauliflower is our friend today. We've mentioned it quite a bit. But that's, you're not even going to really know it's there. So either that or parsnip. Parsnip adds a really unique flavor profile. So if you do 50% parsnip, 50% potato, or 50% cauliflower, 50% potato, you're going to take a lot of that simple carb out of there, and you're going to be adding in another vegetable component as well.
Well, what are you going to add to it to make it nice and creamy and smooth and light?
Well, yeah. So there's a few options here as well. We can do a coconut milk. That's what we use a lot in our kitchen. We go with coconut milk. Depending on the application, you can't even tell it's there. But it still adds that kind of fat feel, that creaminess. Or chicken stock. If you go a chicken stock or a vegetable stock base in your mashed potatoes, again, it's not going to be super duper creamy, but it's going to add a lot of flavor and a lot of moisture, and it's going to completely change the calorie content of your dish. It's really, really great. Again, if you want to use milk, that's fine. Look for something that's lower in fat, low in sugar. But yeah, and then there's always like vegan butters if you want to change your fat. But when we're talking about adding fat to things, a lot of times fat is fat. A vegan butter versus a clarified butter, you're still adding fat to the dish. But again, fat is flavor. It's not necessarily the worst thing in the world.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
All right, so then a sauce for these. We talked about gravies. The request was for a healthy gravy, and
Which do exist.
they do exist, but it's not the same.
Yeah, I mean there are ways if you use a cornstarch slurry to thicken your what's the word I'm looking for, your stock or your base. It's going to remove that flour. It's going to remove that fat. You're adding cornstarch, which is going to create a thickener. It just doesn't quite have the same mouthfeel, but it's still going to be good.
Yeah, I think the closest thing we can make to a gravy is most likely like a velouté, which is similar to a bechamel, but instead of milk or dairy product, you're just thickening stock.
But it has a lot less fat to it, and it's going to take your calorie content down. So instead of being, 250 calories per serving, it's going to be like 80. So. Yeah, you're compromising a little bit of texture for something good, but it's fine. So thank you guys all for sending these in. We are going to now go into our 5-minute recipe of the day, which is a tuna poke bowl. So I'm going to put the spotlight on Shawn here. He's going to tell you guys what that entails.
Okay, so starting things off here, we kind of have a little tray of everything that one would need to make a poke bowl. So first thing you need for your poke is obviously some sort of fish. Today we have some ahi tuna cubes, but you can make this with salmon or really any other type of fish. You can even substitute the fish, use watermelon. But I think the most important part about a poke bowl is the ponzu. So when you are making a ponzu, you need a good quality kombu, and you need some bonito flake. Bonito flake is just smoked, salted bonito or tuna that has then been shaved extremely thin and dried down. So when we're making our kombu, our dashi, we want to start with the kombu, and if you look closely, you can see the white substance on there, and that's actually just salt. So what you really want to do first is just rinse that salt off. So give it a good rinse with cool water, and then we are going to combine the kombu, the bonito, and this is the ponzu we're making, but we're going to add some soy and some mirin as well. And really what you want to do is you barely want to bring this up to a simmer. You don't want it to boil, but we bring it up lightly to a simmer, kill the heat, even remove it from the burner, cover your pot in a little plastic wrap, and then kind of let it steep for 30 to 45 minutes. We're really just trying to develop the flavor, not break down everything. So once we have that done, we'll strain all that out, and then you should have a liquid that once we take that, you cool it, and you can either use it right away or you can add some sort of citrus to it. I'm usually a big fan of yuzu. It's a Japanese citrus, similar to a lime and an orange crossed together.
They're delicious.
But I think that adds a really nice touch with the smokiness of the bonito and the saltiness and the natural ocean flavors you get from the kombu. So then we will take that, and you want your dashi to make sure it's chilled. If it's hot, it's just going to start cooking the tuna. This is a chilled dish. So we will take our tuna and make sure we get it in there. And when you're dressing your poke, you don't want so much sauce that it turns it into a soup, but you do want to coat every bit of it. So you get a nice healthy amount on there. I always kind of give it a toss and a shake. And you can see there's some in the bottom of the bowl, but not a whole lot. Just enough to just kind of coat every little piece. From there, I like to add some English cucumber. And I always like to add it in so it gets tossed in the dashi as well. And some green onion, or scallions, whichever you like to call it. But from here, we'll give this a nice mix. And like I said, we're really just trying to get the ponzu onto all of the different pieces of tuna and your veggies that you put in there. So from there, We'll spoon it into a bowl. You can always pour your leftover Yuzu Ponzu on top. So you got all of your ingredients. And then we're going to start garnishing this, which is really all the fun stuff. I like to start with a little bit of sesame oil. If you add it on last, it's just going to make everything look a little shiny and oily. But if you put it on now, it's kind of well hidden. But it adds a nice nuttiness and a little bit more fat to it to help with that mouthfeel and flavor. Next, I have a little bit of toasted white sesame seed and black sesame seed. A little sprinkle of that. Adds a little texture and some flavor. And a little bit of nice presentation for the color. And then we're going to go with some toasted macadamia nuts. Something similar. It adds to the flavor. It keeps it Hawaiian. And then a little bit of fresh cilantro on top. And there you go.
How beautiful
nice,
is
delicious
that?
Pokeball.
Mm-hmm.
A couple things you can add to this to slightly tweak the flavors. I like to add a little bee pollen to the sesame mix. It adds a little floral character and a little more crunch. And I also like to add some pickled ginger into the mix. Adds a little acid, adds some fun brightness, and ginger is extremely good for you and good for your digestive system, so might as well add that in as well. And it's just a fun, different take on a traditional poke. You could also substitute the tuna with watermelon if you wanted to.
You could, yep, if the raw fish is not doing it for you. And if you smoke watermelon, you put it in the smoker, it actually mimics the same texture as meat, which is really interesting, and it's delicious. All right, so we're going back to our 5 words of the week. We tried to snag a couple other people, but they were all busy at the moment, so I'm going to put Shawn back on the spot.
All right, here we
go.
go.
So comfort food is our first word. Go.
Comfort food. Mother, my mom.
Oh, love it. Sugar.
Sugar addiction. I have a huge addiction to sugar. It's something I battle with every day. So as we talk about cutting sugars out, I am with you in that same process, trying to make myself better every day.
Good. Bacon.
Bacon, delicious. Pork, fatty.
Fried.
Fried, crispy.
And cheese.
Cheese. Ooh, I don't know. First word comes to mind with cheese was dairy, but cheese. What can I say?
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very, very much. And we wanted to just thank you guys again. Wellness Wednesday is like the highlight of our week. So we really appreciate everybody tuning in and supporting us. And we'll keep giving you fun stuff to think about.
See you guys next week.
Bye.